A bitter wind sweeps through the night as a woman bends over her work, her hope as thin as the threadbare fabric clinging to her trembling hands. Poverty has carved silence into her bones. Yet fate stirs when a shadowed figure steps from the glow of a carriage lantern. In the fragile space between duty and desire, a single offer threatens to unravel everything she thought she knew. Secrets hover like breath in the cold air, some ready to save her, others poised to destroy the fragile world she is fighting to protect. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from today? And what do you love most about historical romances? Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets over the cobblestone streets of New York City, blanketing the world in a hush that felt more like a shroud than a holiday cheer. It was Christmas Eve, 1892, and the gas lamps flickered weakly against the gathering dusk, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts in the winter wind. Amelia Whittaker gripped her worn broom tighter, her gloved hands, holes frayed at the fingertips, aching from the cold. At 28, she looked a decade older, her once vibrant auburn hair now dulled by grime and pulled into a severe bun beneath her threadbare shawl. Her dress, a faded grey wool from years past, clung to her slender frame, patched and mended so many times it whispered of better days long gone. She swept the sidewalk in front of the grand tenement on Fifth Avenue, where the wealthy had already retreated to their roaring fireplaces and lavish dinners. The elite of the Gilded Age passed by in horse-drawn carriages, their laughter muffled behind steamed windows, oblivious to the woman toiling in the slush. Amelia's breath came in visible puffs, each one a silent prayer for warmth. Her daughter, little Eliza, only 7 years old, huddled nearby on the stoop, wrapped in a blanket too thin to fend off the chill. The child's cheeks were rosy from the cold, her wide blue eyes, mirrors of her mother's, fixed on the swirling snow with a mix of wonder and fear. "Mama, when do we eat?" Eliza's voice was small, barely cutting through the wind. Amelia forced a smile, kneeling to brush a snowflake from her daughter's lashes. "Soon, my sweet, just a bit longer. Mr. Hargrove will pay us by nightfall, and we'll have bread and maybe even a bit of cheese." But inside, her heart twisted like a knife. The truth gnawed at her. The landlord's coin would barely cover the rent for their cramped room in the Bowery, let alone a proper Christmas meal. Since her husband, Tom, had died in a factory accident 2 winters back, leaving her with debts and a child to raise, survival had become a daily battle. No family to turn to, no charity that didn't come with strings. She was just another widow in a city that chewed up the poor and spat them out. The broom scraped against the ice, sending a sharp pain up her arm. Amelia paused, leaning on it for support, her eyes stinging not just from the wind, but from the weight of it all. How had life come to this? Once she dreamed of a home filled with laughter, of Tom rising through the ranks at the mill. Now she scavenged for scraps, her pride the only thing keeping her upright. Eliza deserved better, a warm coat, books to read, a father's hand to hold, but dreams were luxuries for the rich. A sudden gust whipped the snow into a frenzy, and Amelia pulled Eliza close, shielding her with her body. That's when she heard it. The clip-clop of hooves slowing to a stop. A carriage, black as midnight and gleaming despite the weather, pulled up beside them. The door creaked open and a man stepped out, his tall frame cutting an imposing figure against the storm. He was in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, with a wool overcoat tailored to perfection, lined in fur that spoke of fortunes made in steel or railroads. His face was chiseled, dark hair slicked back under a top hat, and his eyes, sharp, grey like the winter sky, locked onto Amelia with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice deep and steady, carrying the faint drawl of old money from upstate. He doffed his hat slightly, revealing a face marked by a faint scar along his jaw, a remnant perhaps of some youthful folly. "This weather's no fit for man or beast, let alone a lady and her child out here sweeping. Amelia straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must appear. "It's my work, sir. The streets must be clean for Christmas morn." Her tone was polite but guarded. Strangers in the city often meant trouble, even the well-dressed ones. He glanced at Eliza, who peeked out from behind her mother's skirts, curiosity sparking in her eyes. A soft smile tugged at his lips, softening the stern lines of his face. "Work or no, you shouldn't be alone in this. I'm Theodore Langston. And you?" "Amelia Whittaker," she replied, hesitating. Langston, that name rang a bell, whispered in the tenements as one of the new titans, a man who'd built an empire from iron rails crisscrossing the nation. What was a man like him doing speaking to the likes of her? Theodore's gaze lingered, not with pity, but something warmer, appraising. "Miss Whittaker, allow me to offer you and your daughter a ride. My home isn't far, and there's a fire, hot cider, real Christmas spirit, not this frozen misery." Amelia's heart pounded. Accept help from a stranger? It went against every instinct honed by hardship. Yet Eliza shivered violently, her small hand clutching Amelia's skirt. The snow deepened, the night closing in. What choice did she have? One act of kindness could change everything, or lead to ruin. As the carriage door swung wider, inviting them into a world of velvet seats and glowing lanterns, Amelia felt a spark ignite in the cold, a flicker of hope, dangerous and alluring. Little did she know, this chance encounter would unravel the threads of her weary life, weaving them into a tapestry of passion, betrayal, and a love that defied the divides of fortune and fate. But as they stepped inside, the warmth enveloping them like an embrace, a shadow passed over Theodore's features. Secrets lurked in his eyes, ones that could shatter the fragile trust forming between them. What hidden motives drove this tycoon to rescue a street sweeper on the eve of Christmas? The carriage rumbled forward through the snow-swept streets, the wheels crunching over ice like brittle bones underfoot. Inside, the world transformed. Velvet cushions cradled Amelia and Eliza, soft as a forgotten dream, while a brass lantern swung gently, casting golden light that chased away the shadows of the cold. The air smelled of polished leather and faint cigar smoke, a far cry from the damp rot of the Bowery. Amelia sat rigid, her hands folded in her lap, fighting the urge to trace the intricate stitching on the seat. Eliza, wide-eyed, nestled against her side, fingers tentatively touching the fur trim of Theodore's overcoat draped over them like a shared secret. Theodore settled across from them, his long legs stretched out, but his posture remained alert, as if the storm outside mirrored some inner turmoil. He watched Amelia with that steady gaze, the one that seemed to see beyond the grime to the woman beneath. "Tell me, Miss Whittaker," he said, his voice low to not startle the child, "what brings a woman of evident grace to sweeping Fifth Avenue on such a night?" Amelia hesitated, her cheeks warming under his scrutiny. Grace. The word felt like a jest, but his tone held no mockery, only genuine curiosity. She glanced at Eliza, who was now peering out the fogged window at the passing gas lamps, their flames blurring into halos. "Life, Mr. Langston. It has a way of narrowing paths. My husband. He passed 2 years ago, factory work, left us with little but memories and a daughter to raise." Her voice cracked slightly on Eliza's behalf, but she lifted her chin. No pity. She'd learned to swallow that long ago. Theodore nodded slowly, his scarred jaw tightening. "Loss carves deep. I know it well. My father built railroads from nothing, but ambition claimed him young. Overwork, they said, left me to forge ahead alone." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, closing the distance without invading it. "Yet here you are, enduring. That's no small strength." Their eyes met, and for a moment the carriage's sway faded. Amelia saw not the tycoon of whispers, the man who owned half the iron tracks snaking west, but a flicker of vulnerability in those grey depths, a man who, perhaps, swept his own streets in solitude. She looked away first, toward Eliza, who had dozed off, her small chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Strength is all we have sometimes, for her. The carriage slowed, turning onto a quieter avenue lined with brownstones that loomed like silent guardians. Theodore's home came into view, a 4-story mansion of red brick and white trim, its windows aglow with candlelight that promised hearth and haven. Footmen in livery hurried out, umbrellas blooming against the snow as the door swung open. "Welcome," Theodore said simply, extending a hand to help Amelia down. His glove was warm, his grip firm yet gentle, sending an unexpected shiver through her. Not from cold. Inside, the foyer enveloped them in waves of heat from a marble fireplace where logs crackled like whispered confidences. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, though unlit by anything but gas jets that hissed softly. A maid, her uniform crisp with starched collars, appeared with towels and hot water. "Sir, shall I prepare rooms?" Theodore waved her off lightly. "First supper, and something warm for the young miss." He turned to Amelia, his smile softening the edges of his authority. "You'll stay the night. The storm worsens. No debate." Amelia's pulse quickened. Stay? In a stranger's home? Propriety screamed no. Gossip in the tenements would devour her for less. But exhaustion tugged at her bones, and Eliza's sleepy murmur sealed it. "Just till morning, then." "Thank you, sir, truly." They were led to a dining room where a table groaned under silver-domed platters, roast goose glistening with juices, potatoes steamed to fluff, and pies fragrant with cinnamon and apple. Eliza's eyes widened like saucers as a footman served her a bowl of steaming porridge laced with honey. Amelia ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it might vanish. Theodore sat at the head, not lording over the meal but sharing it, his laughter light when Eliza asked about the magic fire in the hearth. As the child yawned, a nursemaid, kind-faced with silver streaking her hair, scooped her up for a guest-room bath and bed. Alone now, Amelia and Theodore lingered by the fire. The flames danced, painting his face in warm hues, highlighting the scar that curved like a question mark. "Why us?" she asked finally, her voice barely above the pop of embers. "You could have driven on. Many do." He poured mulled wine from a decanter, handing her a glass with a steady hand. The steam rose, carrying cloves and promise. "Because I saw myself in you, scraping by unseen, and because—" He paused, swirling his drink, eyes locking on hers again. That intensity returned, laced with something deeper, yearning, perhaps. "Christmas is for miracles, Miss Whittaker. Or at least, for trying to make one." Amelia sipped, the warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a fool's gamble. They talked then, words flowing like the wine, of her girlhood in a Pennsylvania mill town. Dreams of teaching before marriage clipped them short, of his rise from clerk to magnate, forging deals in smoke-filled parlors while rivals schemed in the shadows. Laughter slipped in, a shared tale of a botched holiday feast when Theodore was a boy, gravy splattered like war paint. But as the clock struck 10, a shadow crossed the room. A butler entered, bearing a sealed letter on a silver tray. Theodore's face hardened as he broke the wax seal, scanning the contents. His knuckles whitened on the paper. "Business," he muttered, but his eyes betrayed turmoil, secrets stirring like the storm outside. Amelia rose, sensing the shift. "I should retire. Good night, Mr. Langston." "Theodore," he corrected softly, standing too. Their hands brushed as she took the candle he offered, a spark jumping between them. "Sleep well, Amelia." She nodded, retreating up the grand staircase, heart racing from more than the wine. In the opulent guest room, with its four-poster bed draped in silk, Eliza already slept soundly under quilts thick as clouds. Amelia slipped beside her, whispering thanks to the night. Yet as she drifted off, Theodore's words echoed, miracles. But what if this one came with a price? Downstairs, the letter crumpled in his fist. News of a rival's plot, one that could drag innocence into the fray. And now, with Amelia in his world, the stakes had just risen. Dawn broke over the Langston mansion like a hesitant promise, pale light filtering through heavy velvet curtains to touch the guest room's polished oak floors. Amelia stirred, her body aching from the unaccustomed softness of the feather bed. For a moment, she forgot where she was, reaching instinctively for the thin pallet back in the Bowery. Then Eliza's soft breathing beside her pulled her back. The child slept on, cheeks flushed with warmth, her curls splayed across the pillow like a halo. Amelia's heart swelled. One night of comfort, could it be the start of more? She slipped from the bed, careful not to wake her daughter, and padded to the window. Below, the snow had ceased, leaving the garden a pristine wonderland, evergreens dusted white and statues gleaming under a crisp blue sky. It felt like another world, one where Christmas lingered beyond the dawn. Dressing quickly in her mended gown, now cleaned overnight by silent servants, Amelia smoothed her hair and ventured downstairs. The house hummed with quiet activity, maids polishing silver, the scent of fresh coffee and baking bread wafting from the kitchens. In the breakfast parlour, Theodore already sat at a lace-draped table, newspapers spread before him like battle maps. He looked up as she entered, his grey eyes lighting with genuine surprise and pleasure. No overcoat now, just a crisp white shirt with suspenders, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms, marked by faint ink stains from ledgers long past. The scar on his jaw caught the morning light, adding a rugged edge to his refined features. "Good morning, Amelia. Sleep well?" She nodded. Sliding into the chair, a footman pulled out. "Better than in years. This place, it's like a dream." Her voice held a trace of awe, but she kept her gaze steady, meeting his without flinching. Gratitude warred with caution in her chest. Kindness from men of his stature often hid barbs. He signaled for plates, eggs poached to perfection, rashers of bacon crisp and golden, toast slathered in butter from the countryside estates. Eliza would join soon, he assured her, with the nursemaid seeing to her morning ablutions. As they ate, conversation flowed easily, skirting the edges of their worlds. Theodore spoke of his early days, apprenticed at 14 to a rail baron, sleeping in drafty offices while dreaming of tracks that bound the nation. "Iron doesn't bend easy," he said, fork pausing mid-air, "but neither do I." Amelia shared fragments of her own past, girlhood laughter in a mill village where she'd sewn dresses for neighbours and read novels by candlelight, imagining lives beyond the loom. "Tom was kind, steady. We thought the factory would lift us. Instead—" She trailed off, eyes dropping to her plate. Loss hung between them, a shared shadow. Theodore reached across, his hand covering hers briefly, warm, calloused from rains and rail ties, not the soft palms of idle wealth. The touch lingered a beat too long, sending a quiet thrill up her arm. He withdrew slowly, clearing his throat. "You're more than survivor, Amelia. There's fire in you. I see it." Her cheeks warmed, and she busied herself with coffee. Strong and black as the city nights. Fire, perhaps, but banked low by necessity. Yet his words stirred embers, making her wonder what might blaze if fanned. Eliza burst in then, hair brushed to shine, in a borrowed dress of soft blue wool that transformed her from street urchin to proper young lady. "Mamma, they have pancakes with syrup like rivers." She climbed into Amelia's lap, giggling as Theodore produced a stack, drizzled golden. Breakfast stretched into play, Theodore on the rug with Eliza, building block towers that toppled with dramatic crashes. Laughter echoed, his deep rumble mixing with her peals, while Amelia watched from the settee, a smile tugging her lips. For the first time, the weight on her shoulders lightened. This man, with his empire of steel, knelt like any father, his eyes crinkling at the corners. But as the morning waned, reality intruded. A knock at the parlour door brought the butler, tray in hand with another letter, this one thicker, sealed with red wax. Theodore's mirth faded. He excused himself to his study, the door clicking shut behind him. Amelia caught a glimpse of tension in his stride, the easy warmth replaced by a coiled readiness. Curiosity gnawed at her. While Eliza napped under the nursemaid's care, Amelia wandered the halls, drawn by muffled voices from behind the study door. She paused, hand on the cool brass knob, propriety battling impulse. "Nurse can't let Hargrove's schemes unravel it," Theodore's voice carried, edged with steel. "The merger's key to everything. But if he suspects—" Hargrove, the landlord who'd promised her scant pay last night. A chill prickled her skin. Was this connected? Before she could retreat, the door swung open. Theodore stood there, surprise flickering across his face, then softening. "Amelia, eavesdropping suits you not at all." She flushed, stepping back. "I didn't mean your house, your secrets. I should go. We've imposed enough." He caught her wrist gently, thumb brushing her pulse point, a gesture intimate, electric. "Stay, please. The storm's path is clear, but the roads— Let me offer more than shelter." His eyes searched hers, pleading beneath the command. "A position, perhaps, in my household, not charity, honest work for you and Eliza." Her breath hitched. Work? Here? With him? The offer dangled like forbidden fruit, sweet with possibility, bitter with unknowns. "Why? You scarcely know me." "Because last night reminded me what matters," he murmured, voice dropping. "Not rails or fortunes, people. You." The air thickened, charged with unspoken promises. Amelia's heart raced, torn between flight and the pull of his nearness. The scent of his soap, clean and woodsy. The way his gaze held her like a lifeline. She nodded, tentative. "Until the new year, then. To see." Relief washed over his features, and he smiled, slow and genuine. But as he led her back to the parlour, a footman hurried up with urgent news. A messenger from the docks, bearing word of sabotage on the rail lines. Hargrove's handiwork, no doubt. Theodore's jaw set, the scar standing stark. The warmth of the morning fractured, shadows lengthening. What if his world of intrigue spilled into theirs, turning sanctuary to snare? The days blurred into a tentative rhythm at the Langston mansion, each one weaving Amelia deeper into a life she never dared imagine. By mid-morning on the 26th of December, she found herself in the sunlit sewing room, a space tucked away on the second floor, with windows overlooking the snow-draped gardens. The air carried the faint scent of lavender from sachets in the drawers, and bolts of fine muslin and silk lay stacked like treasures from distant ports. Theodore had introduced her to Mrs. Ellis, the stern but fair housekeeper, who eyed Amelia's mended gown with a nod of approval rather than disdain. "Mending and stitching for the staff to start," Mrs. Ellis had said, her voice clipped like scissors. "Honest work, as the master insists. No idleness here." Amelia's hands, calloused from broom handles, now flew over hems and buttons with a skill honed in her Milltown youth. She worked steadily, the needle's rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the whirlwind in her mind. Eliza, meanwhile, had been enrolled in lessons with the governess, her laughter echoing from the nursery as she traced letters on a slate. For the first time, the child spoke of dreams beyond survival, stories of knights and far-off lands, sparked by the books lining the shelves. Amelia stole glances at her daughter through the open door, heart aching with gratitude and fear. This sanctuary felt too fragile, like frost on a window pane. Theodore appeared at noon, as he often did, striding in with the energy of a man who bent the world to his will. Today, he carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, his overcoat dusted with street snow. "A token," he said, placing it on the table beside her. His eyes, that piercing grey, softened as they met hers. "For your first day. Nothing extravagant." She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a pair of leather gloves, soft, supple, lined with wool. Not the frayed rags she knew, but ones that fit her palms like they were measured in a previous life. "Mr. Langston." "Theodore," she corrected, her voice catching. "This is too much. I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently, pulling up a chair unbidden. The room shrank around them, the outside world fading to a murmur. He leaned in, elbows on the table, close enough that she caught the subtle spice of his cologne, mingled with the crisp air of his morning ride. "You've earned it already. Mrs. Ellis says your stitches rival the finest seamstresses in the city." A flush crept up her neck, and she busied her hands with the gloves, slipping them on. They warmed her instantly, a barrier against more than just the cold. Flattery from a tycoon. "Careful, or I'll think you're scheming for free labor." He chuckled, a low sound that rumbled through the space between them, easing the tension in her shoulders. "No schemes today, just truth. Seeing you here, it writes something in this house. It's been quiet too long." His gaze drifted to the window, where icicles hung like frozen tears. For a moment, vulnerability cracked his composure, a hint of loneliness in the set of his jaw, the scar pulling taut. Amelia's pulse quickened. She wanted to ask about that scar, about the father lost to ambition, about the empire that kept him from softer joys. Instead, she ventured, "Eliza adores the lessons. She asked about you this morning, wants to know if you build real railroads, like in her stories." Theodore's smile returned, brighter now. "Tell her I do. And perhaps tomorrow I'll show her the models in my study, tiny engines, tracks looping forever." He reached out, his fingers brushing hers as he adjusted the glove's cuff, a touch accidental, yet lingering, electric. Neither pulled away immediately. The air hummed with unspoken words, glances that held promises of evenings by the fire, walks in the garden when spring thawed the paths. But the moment shattered with a sharp rap at the door. The butler entered, his face etched with urgency. "Sir, Mr. Hargrove's man is here. Demands a word in the parlour. Something about the East River line." Theodore's expression darkened, the warmth evaporating like mist. He stood abruptly, towering over the table. "See him in, and Amelia, stay clear of the East Wing today." His tone brooked no argument, laced with a protectiveness that both thrilled and unnerved her. As he left, the door clicking shut, Amelia's mind raced. Hargrove again, the name that haunted her nights. The landlord who'd skimped on her pay, now tangled in Theodore's web of rails and rivalries. She resumed her stitching, but the needle pricked her finger, a bead of blood welling up. Wiping it away, she felt the first stir of unease. This position, this kindness, it pulled her into shadows she couldn't see. What if Hargrove's grudge extended to her, a former tenant turned intruder in high society? Afternoon brought a brief respite. Theodore returned, tension eased by a successful parley, or so he claimed. He joined her and Eliza in the conservatory, a glass-walled haven where hothouse orchids bloomed defiantly against the winter. They played cards by a small brazier, Theodore teaching Eliza simple tricks with a deck worn from years of solitary games. Laughter bubbled up, his feigned outrage, when she trumped his ace, her gleeful clap. Amelia watched, her heart swelling at the sight. A makeshift family, fragile as spun glass. Yet as dusk fell, painting the sky in bruised purples, a servant delivered a note to Theodore during their simple tea. His face paled as he read it, crumpling the paper much like the letter on Christmas night. "Trouble on the lines," he said tightly, excusing himself once more. "Sabotage, Hargrove's doing, mark my words." Amelia rose, concern etching her features. "Is there danger?" For you? He paused at the door, turning back. His hand cupped her cheek briefly, thumb tracing her jawline, a gesture bold, intimate, born of the day's closeness. Not if I can help it. Trust me, Amelia. This world of mine, it's rough, but I'll shield you from it. His eyes burned with resolve, but beneath lurked fear, for her, for what his battles might unleash. She nodded, but as he departed into the gathering night, a chill settled in her bones deeper than any snow. Eliza yawned, oblivious, but Amelia wondered how long could warmth hold against the encroaching storm, and what price would Theodore pay to keep his promise, when rivals like Hargrove circled like wolves. The winter sun dipped low over the Langston mansion, casting long shadows across the polished parquet floors as January's chill seeped through the cracks, despite the roaring fires. Amelia paused in the sewing room, her needle hovering mid-stitch on a velvet curtain panel destined for the drawing room. 2 weeks had passed since Christmas, each day layering new routines atop the old uncertainties. Her hands, now gloved in the soft leather Theodore had gifted, moved with a confidence she hadn't felt in years. The work suited her, mending linens for the staff, altering gowns for the occasional visitor, even sketching simple patterns that Mrs. Ellis praised with a rare nod. Eliza thrived under the governess's care, her chatter filling the nursery with tales of arithmetic and fairy realms. Yet beneath the calm, Amelia sensed the house's undercurrents, like a river frozen but rushing below. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. Theodore stood in the doorway, his broad frame filling the space. Dressed in a tailored grey vest over a crisp shirt, the sleeves rolled up as if he'd just come from wrestling ledgers in his study. His dark hair was slightly tousled, the scar on his jaw catching the fading light like a silver thread. "Amelia?" he said, his voice warm, carrying that faint upstate drawl that made her name sound like a secret. "Might I steal you for a moment? The conservatory. It's quiet there now." She set aside her work, heart quickening at the invitation. Private moments with him had become stolen breaths amid the household's bustle, a shared glance over breakfast, his hand steadying hers during a waltz lesson for Eliza's sake. Nothing overt, but each one fanned the embers of something deeper, a pull that defied the chasm of their worlds. "Of course," she replied, smoothing her simple wool dress, borrowed from the maid's stores, its high neck and fitted bodice a far cry from her old rags, yet still marking her as outsider. The conservatory enveloped them in humid warmth, the glass panes fogged against the frost outside, orchids and ferns clustered around a wrought-iron bench, their leaves whispering in the draught from a half-open vent. Theodore gestured for her to sit, then joined her, close enough that their knees nearly brushed. The air smelled of earth and blooms, a sanctuary from the city's clamour. "I've been thinking," he began, his grey eyes fixed on hers with that intensity that unravelled her guard. "About what you said that first night, strength for Eliza. You've given her more than shelter, joy. I see it in her eyes." Amelia's throat tightened. She glanced at a blooming camellia, its petals soft pink, like Eliza's cheeks after play. "She's resilient, like her father was before." She trailed off, the old ache surfacing. Tom had been steady, his hands rough from the mill, but gentle on her skin. Theodore, though his presence stirred a different longing, one laced with possibility and peril. He shifted, his hand covering hers on the bench, deliberate this time, his thumb tracing slow circles over her knuckles. The touch sent warmth spiraling through her, chasing the winter's bite. "I envy that resilience in you. My days are maps of tracks and timetables, but nights, they're empty echoes." His voice dropped, raw with confession. "Since my wife's passing 5 years gone, fever took her swift. I built walls higher than any rail bridge, until you swept into my path, literally." The revelation hung between them, heavy as the humid air. Amelia's breath caught. A wife. The whispers in the tenements had painted him a solitary wolf, not a widower haunted by loss. She turned her hand palm up, lacing her fingers with his, a bold move, her pulse thundering. Grief doesn't sweep clean, does it? It lingers, shapes us. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, she saw mirrors of her own shadows. The factory's clang echoing his empty halls, Tom's absence twining with a love cut short. Theodore leaned closer, his free hand rising to tuck a stray auburn curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. The gesture was tender, charged, the space between them shrinking to whispers. "You've brought light here, Amelia. Not just for Eliza, for me." His lips brushed her forehead, light as a snowflake, sealing the moment with unspoken promise. She closed her eyes, leaning into it. The world narrowing to his scent of sandalwood and steel, the steady beat of his heart against her side. But the fragile peace fractured with the conservatory door's creak. Mrs. Ellis bustled in, her face pinched with worry, a folded note clutched in her hand. "Sir, forgive the intrusion. A telegram from the rail offices. Urgent. Mr. Hargrove's men were spotted near the yards again. Whispers of tampering with the switches." Theodore's hand tightened on Amelia's, then released as he stood, the warmth vanishing like mist. His jaw set, the scar twisting with tension. "Damn him, I'll handle it." He turned to Amelia, regret etching his features. "Stay here, safe." She nodded, but as he strode out, the note's implications chilled her. Hargrove, the man who docked her pay for sloppy sweeps, now a thorn in Theodore's empire, had her past brushed too close to this present? Rising, she followed at a distance, drawn by instinct to the study's half-open door. Voices filtered through, Theodore's low growl, a visitor's oily tone. "Hargrove says the Whitaker woman's a plant, sir. Spying for him, feeding tales of your schedules. Best send her packing before she unravels the merger." Amelia froze, blood roaring in her ears. A plant? The accusation stung like betrayal, twisting her brief joy to dread. She backed away, heart pounding, but not before Theodore's reply sliced the air. "Lies, she's no pawn." Yet doubt crept in. What if Hargrove's grudge sought to drag her down, using her as bait in their war? That evening, as Eliza chattered over supper about a new dollhouse, Amelia forced smiles, her mind churning. Theodore joined them late, his eyes searching hers across the table, a silent plea for trust. Under the gaslight's glow, their fingers brushed passing the bread, a spark amid the storm. But as night fell, she lay awake in her room, the mansion's silence pressing in. If Hargrove's shadows reached this far, how long before they claimed the fragile haven she'd begun to call home? And could love bloom in soil sown with suspicion? The gas lamps along the mansion's drive flickered like wary eyes, as February's winds howled through the bare branches outside. Amelia stood at her chamber window, the frost etching delicate patterns on the pane, mirroring the cracks forming in her resolve. 2 days had passed since the accusation in the study, each hour stretching like taffy pulled too thin. She'd avoided Theodore's gaze at meals, burying herself in the sewing room's endless tasks, hemming footmen's trousers, embroidering linens with subtle vines that hid her trembling hands. Eliza noticed nothing, her world a whirl of lessons and the dollhouse Theodore had gifted, its tiny rooms a kingdom of make-believe. But Amelia carried the weight alone, the word spy echoing like a curse from her Bowery days. Downstairs, the house thrummed with subdued energy. Servants whispered in the halls, their glances lingering on her as she passed. Mrs. Ellis, ever the sentinel, had grown cooler, her instructions clipped. "Mind the east corridor today, Miss Whitaker. Master's orders." Amelia nodded, but suspicion gnawed deeper. Was Hargrove's reach so long? The man who'd once berated her for uneven sweeps, now weaving lies to topple a tycoon, and her along with it. Mid-morning brought a summons. A footman rapped softly on the sewing-room door, his livery crisp despite the draught. "Mr. Langston requests your presence in the library, ma'am." Amelia's stomach twisted. The library, a vast chamber of mahogany shelves groaning under leather-bound tomes, its fireplace a constant blaze, had become their quiet refuge in stolen moments. She smoothed her borrowed gown, a modest grey serge with lace at the cuffs, and followed. Her footsteps muffled on the Persian rugs. Theodore waited by the hearth, his back to the door, one arm braced on the mantel. He turned as she entered, his grey eyes shadowed, the scar along his jaw stark in the firelight. No vest today, just shirt sleeves, ink smudged on his fingers from morning correspondence. "Amelia," he said, voice rough as gravel under boots. "You've been a ghost these past days. Tell me what's haunting you." She hesitated in the doorway, the warmth failing to reach her chilled core. Books towered around them, their spines whispering forgotten histories, but this moment felt raw, exposed. "I heard," she confessed, stepping closer, her skirts brushing the fender, "in the study, Hargrove's man, calling me a plant, a spy." The words tasted bitter, like chicory in weak tea. "Is it true? Do you doubt me now?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her, his presence a wall of restrained intensity. Doubt? Never. His hand rose, then fell, respecting the invisible barrier she'd raised. "That snake Hargrove, he's losing ground on the rail merger. Desperate men sling mud. You're no spy. Amelia, you're—" He searched for the word, eyes locking on hers with that fierce clarity. Salvation, in this cold empire of mine. Her breath caught. The fires crackled the only sound for a beat. Salvation. From a man who'd conquered steel and stone. She wanted to believe, to lean into the pull that drew her like iron to lodestone. But fear lingered, sharp as a dropped needle. "He knows me, Theodore. From the streets. What if he uses that? Drags Eliza into his games?" Theodore's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath the scar. He guided her to a wing chair by the fire, kneeling before it as she sat, his hands resting on the arms, caging without capturing. "Let him try. I'll crush his schemes like gravel under ties." His voice dropped, intimate, urgent. "Listen. The merger seals my lines from Boston to Chicago. Hargrove wants a piece, or my ruin. But you're not part of that dirt. Stay with me. Fight it beside me." Amelia's fingers itched to trace his brow, to smooth the furrows of worry. Instead, she cupped his face, thumb grazing the scar's edge, a question unspoken. "How did this come?" she murmured. He leaned into her touch, eyes closing briefly. "Boyhood scrap in the yards, defending my father's honor against rivals." A ghost of a smile. "Marks us all, don't they? Yours are hidden, but I see them. The strength in your stitches, the light in Eliza's laugh." The air thickened, charged with the scent of burning oak and old paper. Amelia's heart pounded, the distance between them shrinking as she slid forward. Their lips met, tentative at first, a brush of warmth against the winter's bite, then deepening with the hunger of unspoken nights. His hand tangled in her hair, gentle, reverent, pulling her closer. She tasted salt and resolve, the kiss a bridge over chasms of class and loss. Time blurred, the library fading to embers and whispers. They parted, breathless, foreheads touching. "This, us," Theodore whispered. "It's worth the storm." But joy fractured with a sharp knock. The butler entered, face ashen. "Sir, a rider from the yards. Switches tampered. 2 cars derailed near the bridge. No deaths, but Hargrove's signature all over it. And a note for Miss Whittaker." Theodore rose, shielding her as the man handed over a sealed envelope. Its wax stamped with a crude rail insignia. Amelia's hands shook as she broke it, Theodore reading over her shoulder. Scrawled words leaped out. "Street rat in silk won't save him. Leave, or the girl pays." H. Dread coiled in her gut, cold as the February gust rattling the windows. Hargrove's threat slithered into their haven, turning sanctuary to siege. Theodore crumpled the note, fire blazing in his eyes. He won't touch you, either of you. But as he pulled her into an embrace, strong arms a bulwark against the encroaching dark, Amelia wondered, how far would this war go? And what hidden leverage did Hargrove hold, waiting to strike at the heart of their fragile world? The February gale battered the mansion's windows like an unrelenting foe, rattling the panes as if the storm itself carried Hargrove's venomous words. Amelia clutched the crumpled note in her fist, the paper's edges biting into her palm, while Theodore paced the library's Persian rug, his boots thudding softly against the wool. The fire popped and hissed, casting erratic shadows that danced across the leather-bound volumes, mirroring the chaos in her chest. Eliza slept upstairs, oblivious in her nursery cocoon, but the threat slithered through the walls, coiling around Amelia's heart. "He knows where we are," she whispered, her voice fracturing like thin ice. "How? I've told no one." Theodore stopped, his broad shoulders tensing under the crisp shirt, the scar on his jaw pulling tight in the firelight. He knelt before her again, this time taking both her hands in his, warm, steady anchors amid the whirl. "Servants talk, or Hargrove spies in the streets, but he won't get near you. I'll post guards at the gates, double the watch." His grey eyes burned with a ferocity that both comforted and terrified her, a tycoon's resolve forged in boardrooms and rail yards. Yet beneath it, she glimpsed the man who'd knelt with Eliza over block towers, his laughter a rare bloom in winter. Amelia searched his face, the kiss from moments ago still tingling on her lips, a stolen fire that now felt like a beacon drawing wolves. And if he escalates? The derailment was a warning. What next? A carriage accident on our way to market. Her mind raced to Eliza's bright curls, her daughter's trusting smile as she waved from the nursery window. Loss had already carved her once. She couldn't bear another scar. He rose, pulling her up with him, his arms encircling her waist in a protective hold that pressed her against his chest. The scent of him, sandalwood and faint ink, enveloped her, a shield against the dread. "Then we fight smarter. I've wired allies in the railboard. Hargrove's merger bid crumbles without proof, and I'll bury him in scandals first." His breath stirred her hair, warm against her temple. "But tonight, no more shadows. Come, let me show you something real." He led her through dim corridors, the gas jets flickering like hesitant stars, past portraits of stern Langston ancestors glaring from oiled frames. They descended a narrow stair to the basement, where the air grew cooler, laced with the metallic tang of oil and iron. A heavy oak door creaked open to reveal his private workshop, a cavernous space lit by hanging lanterns, cluttered with gleaming models of locomotives and sprawling maps pinned to walls. Tiny rails snaked across tabletops, bridges arched in miniature over painted rivers, engines poised mid-chug on brass tracks. It was a boy's dream made manifest, a tycoon's obsession laid bare. Theodore flicked a switch, gas valves hissing to life, and a small engine whirred forward, its wheels clicking rhythmically along the rails. "This is where it starts," he said, his voice softening as he guided her to a workbench. "Not in smoky parlours with cutthroat bids, but here, building what lasts." He picked up a delicate coupling pin, turning it in his fingers, the metal catching the light. "My father taught me. Said rails bind the nation, but they start with one link." Amelia traced the model's curve, her gloved hand brushing his. Wonder edged out fear for a breath. These weren't cold empires, but intricate worlds of possibility. "Like us," she murmured, glancing up, "one link at a time. But Hargrove, he breaks them." Theodore set the pin down, turning to her fully. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb grazing her lower lip, a touch that ignited the embers from their kiss. "Not ours, not if we forge stronger." He leaned in, capturing her mouth again, slower this time, deliberate. The kiss deepened, his lips parting hers with a gentleness that belied his strength, tongues brushing in a tentative dance that sent heat pooling through her veins. She melted against him, hands fisting his shirt, the workshop fading to the rhythm of their breaths mingling, hearts pounding in sync. They broke apart, foreheads resting together, the air thick with unspoken vows. "Stay with me, Amelia," he whispered, voice husky. "Not just in this house, in my life. Marry me, let me give Eliza, us, a future unmarred by streets or schemes." Her heart soared, then plummeted. Joy warred with terror, the proposal a lifeline, yet tethered to his turbulent world. "Theodore, it's too soon. The threats—" A distant thud echoed from above, shattering the intimacy. Footsteps pounded down the stairs, the door bursting open to reveal the butler, lantern in hand, face pale as new snow. "Sir, riders at the gate, 3 men armed, Hargrove's colours on their scarves. They're demanding Miss Whittaker." Theodore shoved Amelia behind him, grabbing a poker from the hearth like a sabre. "Barricade the doors! Call the watch!" his voice thundered, the tender suitor vanishing into the protector, eyes blazing with unyielding fire. Amelia's pulse roared, the workshop's wonders now a cage. As shouts erupted outside, the rail's tiny engines gleamed mockingly, symbols of connection, now threats of collision. How deep did Hargrove's malice run? And in this siege, could their budding love withstand the onslaught, or would it derail before the vows were spoken? The shouts from the gate pierced the night like shards of ice, echoing through the mansion's stone walls as Theodore gripped the poker tighter, his knuckles white against the iron. Amelia's heart hammered in her chest, pressed close to the workshop's shadowed corner, the air thick with the scent of oil and fear. The tiny locomotives on the workbench gleamed under the lanterns, their frozen progress a cruel mockery of the chaos unfolding above. "Stay here," Theodore commanded, his voice a low growl that brooked no argument. He glanced back, grey eyes fierce yet tender, locking onto hers for a heartbeat that stretched eternal. "I'll end this." She nodded, though every fibre screamed to follow, to shield him as he'd shielded her. The door slammed shut behind him, footsteps thundering up the stairs, leaving her alone in the dim glow. Her hands trembled as she clutched the workbench edge, the proposal's warmth now a distant ember buried under dread. Marry him. Build a life amid rails and rivals. Hargrove's note burned in her mind, crude threats scrawled like venom, targeting Eliza, the one light she couldn't lose. Upstairs, the foyer erupted in clamour. Servants scrambled, barring doors with heavy oak benches, while the butler barked orders to the footman armed with whatever lay at hand. Fire pokers, candlesticks, even a ceremonial sabre from the hall display. Theodore burst into the grand hall, coat unbuttoned, face set like forged steel. Through the frosted window panes, shadows moved beyond the iron gates. 3 riders on horseback, scarves whipping in the wind, their lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. One dismounted, pounding the bars with a gloved fist. "Langston, send out the woman! Hargrove wants words about debts unpaid and secrets spilled." Theodore strode to the entrance, flinging open the door just enough to face the night without inviting it in. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that stung like accusations. "Tell your master to crawl back to his hole," he roared, voice carrying over the gale. "Amelia Whittaker owes him nothing. Touch her, or the child, and I'll see his empire in ruins by dawn." The rider sneered, face half hidden by his muffler, eyes glinting with malice. Bold words for a man hiding behind skirts. "She's poison. Langston fed me tales of your schedules, your merger plans. Pay up or we drag her out ourselves." Lies. Amelia, listening from the stairwell's shadows, felt bile rise. She'd swept his stoops, endured his leers for pennies, but never betrayed a soul. Hargrove twisted her desperation into daggers, aiming for Theodore's throat. The Tycoon's laugh barked out, sharp and unyielding. "Spy! She's worth 10 of you curs. Ride off, or my men will make you." A scuffle broke at the gate, guards emerging from the stables, lanterns raised, shotguns glinting in the moonlight. The riders hesitated, horses stamping nervously, then wheeled away into the blizzard, their curses swallowed by the wind. Theodore slammed the door, bolting it with a finality that echoed through the house. Silence fell, broken only by the fire's crackle and a distant sob from the kitchen maid. He turned, spotting Amelia on the stairs, her face pale as the snow drifting past the windows. In 3 strides he was there, pulling her into his arms, the poker clattering to the floor. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling the familiar sandalwood laced with sweat and resolve. "They're gone," he murmured, hand stroking her hair. "For now." She pulled back, searching his eyes. He won't stop. That note. Eliza. Panic clawed at her throat. Visions of her daughter roused from sleep, snatched into the night. Theodore cupped her face, thumbs wiping tears she hadn't realized fell. "No one takes her. I'll send her and you to my sister's estate upstate at first light. Safe. Hidden. Trains leave at dawn. I'll see to it personally." His voice softened, the protector yielding to the man who'd knelt in the conservatory. "But promise me, Amelia, when this blows over, you'll say yes. To me. To us." Her breath hitched, the workshop's intimacy flooding back. The kiss, the whir of model engines, his whispered vow. In his arms amid the siege's aftermath, hope flickered defiant. She nodded, lips brushing his jaw in a feather-light promise. "Yes, but only if we face it together." Relief washed over him, and he kissed her then, fierce, claiming, yet laced with the tenderness of futures imagined. The world outside howled, but here, in the hall's warm glow, their bond forged stronger, a rail unbent by storm. Dawn crept in grey and reluctant, the mansion stirring with hurried preparations. Eliza, bleary-eyed but trusting, clutched a small valise as the carriage readied in the drive. Amelia bundled her in a wool cloak, the child's questions met with soft assurances. Theodore oversaw it all, his presence a bulwark, though shadows under his eyes spoke of a sleepless night, wiring allies and plotting counters. As the horses stamped, ready to pull away, a messenger arrived on horseback, snow-caked and urgent. He thrust a sealed packet into Theodore's hands, official railboard stationery, wax unbroken. Theodore scanned it, face hardening. "Hargroves filed a formal complaint. Accuses me of collusion, using connections to sway the merger." His gaze flicked to Amelia, pain flashing. "He names you as leverage. Not a spy, but a scandal. Widow in my house, unchaperoned." Amelia's blood ran cold. Scandal in the Gilded Age cut deeper than knives, whispers that could ruin reputations, isolate Eliza from society. "What now?" she whispered, hand on the carriage door. Theodore stepped close, voice low for her ears alone. "I fight it, publicly, expose his sabotages, his debts to crooked lenders, but you must go. Now. Trust me to end this." Eliza tugged her skirt. "Mamma, will Mr. Theo come too?" "Soon, sweet one," Amelia replied, forcing a smile. She met Theodore's eyes one last time, the kiss from the hall lingering like a talisman. The carriage lurched forward, wheels crunching snow, carrying them toward safety, but leaving her heart behind. As the mansion faded in the rear view, a new dread bloomed. Hargrove's web tightened, pulling Theodore into a public fray where secrets unraveled like frayed threads. Could he win without dragging her name through the mud? Or would the Tycoon's battle become their undoing, testing love's rails against the crush of empire's grind? The carriage jolted over rutted roads, the wheels groaning against the frozen earth as February's grey skies wept a fine mist that clung to the windows like reluctant farewells. Amelia held Eliza close, the child's head lolling against her shoulder in uneasy sleep. her small breaths fogging the chill air inside. The upstate estate loomed in Amelia's thoughts, a sprawling farmhouse Theodore's sister Clara had promised as sanctuary, far from New York's venomous whispers. But distance did little to quiet the storm in her heart. Theodore's kiss lingered on her lips, a vow sealed in the hall's firelight, yet doubt gnawed like frostbite. Hargrove's accusations, scandal, leverage, threatened to smear them both, turning their fragile love to ash before it could blaze. Days blurred into a tense vigil at the estate. Clara, a widow herself, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, pinned in a simple chignon, welcomed them with open arms and a hearth roaring against the cold. Theo's wired every hour, she confided over tea in the parlour, her wool gown rustling as she poured from a silver pot. That devil Hargrove's pushing his claims in the railboard hearings, calling my brother a puppet master, twisting every deal into collusion. Amelia's hands tightened on her cup, the porcelain warm but unyielding. Eliza played nearby with wooden dolls Clara had unearthed from attic trunks, her laughter a fragile shield. But nights brought nightmares, visions of Theodore alone in the fray, his empire crumbling under lies. Word arrived in fits and starts, telegrams crackling over wires, delivered by riders on lathered horses. Hargrove paraded witnesses in smoke-filled boardrooms, dock workers bribed to swear Theodore sabotaged lines first, tenement gossips claiming Amelia was his kept woman, a ploy to sway votes. The Tycoon's name splashed across penny papers, rail baron's scandal, widow in the web. Amelia paced the estate's creaking floors. Her borrowed shawl slipping from shoulders grown tense, indignation boiled in her veins, hot against the winter's grip. Hargrove, that petty landlord with his greasy smiles and docked wages, now wielding scandal like a club. He'd crushed her spirit on Fifth Avenue's stoops. Now he aimed to shatter Theodore's legacy. "He's a vulture," she whispered to Clara one evening, staring into the fire's embers, feeding on the weak to claw higher. Clara nodded, her face etched with worry. "Theo fights fair, always has. But the board's old blood, men who fear his rise. If they side with Hargrove—" She trailed off, the unspoken ruin hanging heavy. Back in the city, Theodore stood at the railboard's oak-panelled chamber, gas chandeliers hissing overhead like serpents. The room reeked of cigar smoke and polished ambition, directors in pinstripe suits leaning forward, eyes sharp as switchblades. Hargrove sat smug across the long table, his paunch straining a brocade vest, fingers drumming a silver watch fob. "Gentlemen," the rival drawled, voice oily as lantern fuel, "Langston's merger reeks of monopoly, and this Whitaker woman, she's no innocent. I paid her to sweep my streets. Now she sweeps his secrets straight to his bed, proof of moral rot unfit for our rails." Murmurs rippled, heads nodding like pendulums. Theodore's fists clenched under the table, the scar on his jaw throbbing with restrained fury. Amelia dragged through mud like a criminal, her honor bartered for boardroom points. No arrests, no chains. Just the slow poison of insinuation, designed to isolate, to break. He rose, broad frame casting a shadow over the maps and ledgers spread before them. "Lies from a man who'd tamper with switches to kill innocents," he said, voice steady as iron ties, pulling a sheaf of documents from his briefcase. Affidavits from yardmen, ledgers of Hargrove's bribes to saboteurs. "Your derailment, your doing. And Miss Whitaker, she's a widow of valor, not your pawn. Accuse her again and face libel in every court from here to Albany." The room stilled. Hargrove blustered, face reddening like overripe fruit. But Theodore pressed on, unveiling telegrams tracing funds to Hargrove's crooked lenders, debts that could bankrupt his lines. Gasps echoed, directors shifted, whispers turning to outrage. "You've overreached, Hargrove," the chairman intoned finally, gavel rapping like a final nail. "Merger approved, your bids revoked. Leave this board, or we'll summon the law for your sabotages." Hargrove slunk out, defeated, his empire fracturing under the weight of exposed greed. No jail for him yet, just the slow bleed of ruin, contracts voided, allies fleeing. Theodore exhaled, the chamber emptying to echoes, but victory tasted bittersweet. Amelia enduring slurs in seclusion, Eliza's future shadowed by inkstains on newsprint. He wired the estate at once. "One, come home, yours forever." The carriage returned under a sky clearing to hesitant blue, snow melting into rivulets that promised spring. Amelia stepped down at the mansion's drive, Eliza skipping ahead to the gardens, her cloak swirling like a banner. Theodore waited at the door, overcoat open against the mild air, his smile breaking wide, raw, unarmored joy. He swept Amelia into his arms, lifting her off the stoop, lips claiming hers in a kiss that sealed the storm's end. "It's over," he murmured against her mouth, hands framing her face. "Hargrove's broken. No more threats, just us." She laughed through tears, fingers threading his dark hair, the scar brushing her palm like a cherished mark. "You fought for me, for us." Inside, the foyer bloomed with fresh flowers, camellias from the conservatory, symbol of their whispered vows. Eliza tugged Theodore's hand, demanding stories of the big win, and he obliged, kneeling to spin tales of rails uniting lands, not dividing hearts. That evening, by the fire's steady glow, Theodore slipped a ring onto Amelia's finger, a simple gold band with a single pearl, gleaming like dawn on tracks. No grand society affair, just vows exchanged in the library, Clara as witness, Eliza scattering petals from hothouse roses. "I take you, Amelia Whittaker, as my wife," he said, voice thick, eyes shining, "through every storm." "And I you, Theodore Langston," she replied, heart full, "binding our lives like iron to stone." Hargrove faded to whispers, a cautionary tale in tenement yarns, his schemes unravelled without a single bar of justice for the innocent couple. Their love, forged in snow and suspicion, emerged triumphant, a bridge spanning fortunes and fates. As night fell, Eliza asleep upstairs, Amelia and Theodore lingered in embrace, the mansion no longer empty, but alive with promise. The Gilded Age's glitter held no sway over this quiet victory, love's rails unbent, carrying them forward. 10 years had woven their gentle threads through the Langston legacy, transforming the red brick mansion on the quieter edge of Fifth Avenue into a haven alive with the patter of young feet and the murmur of enduring love. It was Christmas Eve again, 1902, and snowflakes drifted lazily past the frost-laced windows, softer now than the blizzard that had first bound Amelia and Theodore together. The gas lamps outside glowed steady, their flames a warm echo of the roaring hearth within, where family gathered under the weight of shared memories. Amelia Langston, no longer Whittaker, though the name still whispered in her dreams, stood at the parlour threshold, a soft smile curving her lips as she watched the scene unfold. At 38, time had polished her features with a quiet grace. Auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, streaked faintly with silver like autumn leaves, and her figure softened by motherhood, clad in a deep green velvet gown with lace cuffs that spoke of comfort earned, not borrowed. The frayed shawl of her sweeping days was a relic, tucked away in a cedar chest, replaced by cashmere wraps and the steady warmth of a life rebuilt. Eliza, now 17, presided over the tree trimming with the poise of a young woman stepping into society. Tall and willowy, her blue eyes sparkled with the same curiosity that had once peered from behind her mother's skirts, but now they held dreams of her own. Perhaps a finishing school in Boston, or sketches of gardens she'd design one day. She balanced a crystal star atop the evergreen, laughing as it wobbled. "Papa, if this falls, it's your fault for distracting me with that story about the model trains." Theodore chuckled from his armchair by the fire, his broad frame settled comfortably, though the years had etched fine lines around his grey eyes, marks of battles won and nights spent poring over blueprints. At 45, the scar on his jaw remained a faint reminder of youthful scraps, but his hair had silvered at the temples, lending him the air of a patriarch whose empire spanned not just rails, but hearts. He held their youngest, little Thomas, 3 years old and named for Amelia's lost husband, on his knee. The boy tugged at his father's watch chain, babbling about choo-choos that Theodore mimed with exaggerated puffs of steam, drawing giggles from the room. Beside them sat young Clara, 7 and fierce as her aunt, with Theodore's dark curls and Amelia's determined chin. She'd inherited her father's love for the workshop, often sneaking down to tinker with the ever-expanding models that now included electric novelties, though Theodore kept the old gas lanterns for nostalgia's sake. "Mama, look," Clara called, holding up a handmade ornament. A tiny iron rail bent into a heart, painted gold. "For the tree, like how you and Papa connected." Amelia crossed the room, kneeling to admire it, her hand brushing Theodore's as she did. The touch lingered, a silent language honed over a decade of quiet triumphs and whispered confidences. Their wedding in that intimate library had blossomed into this: 2 more children, a home expanded with a nursery wing and sunlit playrooms, Eliza's debut under chandeliers that no longer felt foreign. The rail empire had grown, lines threading west to the Pacific, but Theodore had stepped back from the fray, delegating to trusted lieutenants. No more smoke-filled boardrooms at midnight. Instead, evenings like this, with mulled cider steaming on the sideboard and carols hummed by a maid in the hall. Yet nostalgia tugged at Amelia's heart, pulling her gaze to the window where the snow deepened. Hargrove's shadow had faded long ago, his schemes unraveling like cheap thread. After the board's verdict, his debts had mounted, lenders calling in favors until his lines crumbled. Foreclosed, auctioned to upstarts who built cleaner. Whispers said he'd retreated to a dingy boarding house in Brooklyn, bitter and broken, his name a caution in tenement tales. No grand justice, just the slow grind of consequence. He'd paid dearly, his greed a noose of his own making, while Amelia and Theodore emerged unscathed, their love a bulwark against the storm. Theodore caught her eye, reading the quiet reflection in her face as easily as a timetable. He shifted Thomas to one arm and extended the other to her. "Come, my love. The past is the snow outside, beautiful but melting." His voice, deep and steady, carried that upstate drawl, unchanged by fortune. She settled beside him, Clara climbing into her lap with the ornament still clutched tight. Eliza joined them on the settee, the family forming a circle around the fire's glow. "Do you remember that first Christmas?" Eliza asked, her voice soft with wonder. "The carriage, the warmth. It was like a fairy tale." Amelia nodded, tears pricking her eyes, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. "It was, and every year since has been the continuation." She leaned into Theodore, his arm encircling her waist, pulling her close. The children chattered on, oblivious to the depth of the moment, but Theodore's fingers traced her palm, a habit from their courting days, when touches spoke what words dared not. As the clock chimed 8, the nursemaid herded the little ones toward baths and bed, their protests mingling with yawns. Eliza excused herself to finish a letter to a friend, leaving Amelia and Theodore alone in the parlor's hush. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handing her one before drawing her to the window. Outside, the world lay blanketed in white, gas lamps haloed like stars. 10 years, he murmured, clinking his glass to hers, "and I'd sweep every street in New York again for this." She turned to him, cupping his face, thumb grazing the scar. "No need. We've built our own path." Their lips met in a kiss, slow and deep, seasoned by time, passion tempered to something unbreakable, a flame that warmed without consuming. The fire crackled on, casting their shadows long and intertwined. In that moment, the Gilded Age's glitter seemed distant, irrelevant. Here was their true fortune, a love that had defied divides, weathered threats, and bloomed into legacy. As snow continued to fall, soft and forgiving, Amelia knew their story wasn't ended, but merely entering its golden chapter, rails extending into a horizon bright with promise. As the snowflakes danced beyond the window that Christmas Eve, Amelia and Theodore lingered in their embrace, the warmth of the parlor sealing a decade of triumphs and trials. Their love, born from the grit of frozen streets and forged in the fires of adversity, stood as a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit. In the Gilded Age's glittering facade of excess and inequality, they had carved a path of quiet defiance, one where a single mother's resilience met a tycoon's hidden heart, turning despair into enduring joy. What lessons whisper from their tale? First, that kindness, offered without expectation, can bridge the widest chasms of class and circumstance. Theodore's simple gesture on that fateful night wasn't charity born of pity, but a spark of recognition in a man weary of isolation. Amelia's strength, unbowed by loss, reminded us that true wealth lies not in fortunes amassed, but in the courage to accept a hand extended through the storm. Second, love blooms not in perfection, but in perseverance. Their bond weathered scandals, threats, and societal whispers, proving that genuine connection defies the machinations of the greedy and the judgmental. Hargrove's downfall, self-inflicted by his own venom, serves as a stark warning. Ambition unchecked devours its host, while integrity endures, lifting those who choose compassion over conquest. And finally, hope is the greatest revolution. In an era of robber barons and forgotten laborers, Amelia and Theodore showed that one act, one glance, one vow can rewrite destinies. Their family, now a lively tapestry of laughter and legacy, stands as proof that from the humblest beginnings, legacies of love can stretch like endless rails into the future. If this story touched your heart, if it stirred memories of your own battles won or dreams pursued, drop a comment below. Share what resonated most, perhaps the spark of that first encounter or the quiet victory of their hearthside vows. And to let me know you journeyed to the very end, write the word rails in your message. It'll be our secret signal, helping spread these tales to more souls seeking inspiration. Don't forget to like if the drama kept you hooked, and subscribe for more epic romances from the Gilded Age, stories of passion, peril, and triumph that will transport you back in time. Check out the cards for similar narratives, widowed heiresses reclaiming empires, or star-crossed lovers defying industrial titans. Your engagement fuels these adventures, so join the conversation and let's keep the stories rolling. Until next time, may your own path be lit by unexpected miracles.